Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome to Time for Truth Show. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, and it's a pleasure to have you back with us again today. Many of you have been asking how you avail yourself of the previous episodes. Very simple. You go on YouTube, find a Time for Truth show, click subscribe. There you see it on the screen, and you will be able to get all the previous episodes. This program today is very special, so I want to get right to it because we have a very special guest, and we're going to be discussing a day that just recently passed, the United Nations International Day of Democracy. Democracy and our freedoms and our human rights. And we have a very special guest for you that we're going to get to introduce immediately. Buddha, if you put his pictures up on the screen, I want to introduce our Time for Truth viewers to Ambassador Carlos Garcia of Salvador, who I met about 6 years ago at the United Nations. There you see him. He's a career diplomat from El Salvador that served his country in the United Nations from 1996 to 2014 in many different positions and ranks, his last position being the permanent representative of El Salvador to the United Nations. He and his wife Inez have a daughter, Melanie Elizabeth. The ambassador holds a Doctor of Philosophy from American University, a Doctorate of Letters from the Academy of Universal Global Peace, an honorary degree of Doctorate in Leadership and Governance from the United Graduate College, an honorary Doctorate of Human Letters, a fellowship of the Entrepreneurship Center, Touro College, and a Doctor in Philosophy of Communications from Sella International. Carlos has participated in so many fields. We had to cut down his bio. He's such a prolific person, but he's been involved in international relations, development agenda, international law, political and economical fields, as well as social, humanitarian, cultural, and human rights issues in 26 different countries. The ambassador joined the private sector July 2014, founding CG Global Consultant, a consultancy focused on international relations, in particular multilateral affairs, information and communication technologies, financing for development, human development, prevention of violence, culture of peace, and the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. In addition, Ambassador Garcia has been actively participating in the government organizations in New York by acting as Vice President of the World Organization on Governance and Competitiveness. In 2016, he founded the United Nations Association of El Salvador Incorporated and is its Secretary General. In 2018, Ambassador Garcia was appointed Professor of the International Academy of Science and Technology and Education and Humanities based in Valencia, Spain. In 2019, Ambassador Carlos was appointed as International Governor of El Salvador by the Board of Governing Council of Governors of both AUGP USA and UNUGP USA. And in April 2019 was appointed President of the Organization for Poverty and Alleviation and Development for the United Nations. We could go on and on and on, but let's bring him up live. And Buddha, if you bring him on the screen, I want to bid a warm welcome to, in Spanish, Embajador Carlos Garcia, the Salvador. Welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you, Dr. Bernard Fialco, my dear friend. It's my pleasure and honor to share with you this wonderful program, and of course to be able to discuss some important topic that we are going to address tonight, and also to share with your audience the importance of the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals, but as well as the main topic that we're going to discuss tonight, which is the International Day of Democracy, promoted by the United Nations in the year 1997. So it's my pleasure to be here with you.
Well, I want to thank you for taking time to be with us. You're a very busy man, and you do so many things. I wanted to ask you something right away. As a youth, what motivated you and inspired you to pursue such a diverse and multitude of fields of endeavor?
Well, I would say that initially, when I was a young, I have a dream to one day to become an ambassador. I would say that was my dream, but I didn't know how to achieve that particular goal. In my country, El Salvador, there was the University of El Salvador. It's a national university. It's a public university, and they created, I would say, the career of international relations. So I thought that that would be the best way to start my career, that eventually will end up as an ambassador. I realized that later on that not only academic background it would be enough for achieving my goal. So I need to join the public institution that deal directly with international relations, which is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I was honored and had the privilege to be accepted as one of the officials within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the year 1991. And my first appointment was to deal with the relationship between El Salvador and the Caribbean countries. One interesting anecdote that I have on that regard, and very quickly, is that the very first day of my job in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from that particular branch, it was also the day in which the president Aristide of Haiti had a coup d'etat. So I was kind of inaugurating my job with the task to prepare declaration from El Salvador, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, rejecting precisely the coup d'etat against President Aristide in Haiti. So it was very interesting from that time on, and quickly as well, 5 years after being working in San Salvador in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I had the dream to become a diplomat and be appointed in any of the foreign embassies or consulate of a country outside El Salvador. And I was lucky enough to be selected to be sent to the permanent mission of El Salvador to the United Nations in New York. That was in the year 1996. And for different reasons, and I believe also God played an important role in preparing me for quite a long time to end up being the head of the mission as ambassador and permanent representative on that particular mission 18 years later. So, in short, what helped me to have this vision or multitask vision, if you like. I think it was precisely the role that I play following different topics within the United Nations, because that allows me to understand how the international relation is a complex task that is not just about politics or economics, but also it's about culture, also it's about social issues, also about important topics such as democracy, freedom of expression, but at the same time how people uh, needs to be empowered and also promote development. But at the same time, how all these goals can be um, transmitted to the general public. And that was, I would say, the time when I realized that even though the United Nations has wonderful ideas and, of course, excellent resolutions, not necessarily real people around the world is able to understand what the UN is trying to say, because the level of understanding vary differently because of the complexity of the topics. So, in a way, I need to become a translator from what the United Nations is trying to say to the common people, and that is part of the communication side that I really like to share with you tonight.
Well, you know what? That's why I wanted to have you on the show, because you're a great communicator. You're very clear when you speak, and it's very easy to follow you. So I know our viewers would get a lot from hearing you, and you have such a wealth of experience. There's a very short video, engineer, that about 45 seconds, if you can put it on before I give the next question to the ambassador. So if you put video 1 on just for a moment, and it'll actually bring out the subject of the International Day of Democracy and the importance of democracy and government, really, by the people. Do you have that ready? Okay, so why don't we get that ready? And, while we do, Ambassador, what are your viewpoints on the importance of the democratic process in this day of democracy that the UN actually founded?
It's very interesting because, in my personal view, the UN was able to accumulate a very important amount of experience regarding how developing countries were able to move from dictatorships to democracy. However, in my view, after COVID, or in the new reality that the world is living after the pandemic, I would say that the UN is left behind, because reality goes beyond what the UN is actually able to accomplish. Not because the UN doesn't have the experience to do so, but because democracy has evolved quickly in several countries, and the UN needs to do an important effort to be able to achieve or to be in a situation where it can lead process for certain democracies in the world today. And that is a challenge that the UN has today that I really would like to expand when you, give me the opportunity to explain a little bit more this topic.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do you have that video ready, engineer? Okay, put
Okay,
on video 1.
And so the king ordered his men into battle, and even though he was no longer acting in their best interest, they followed obediently. But what if they didn't? What if they just refused? What if selfish leaders got no support? What if people had the courage to stand up when something wasn't right? What if the government didn't just serve a lucky few? What if it was designed and run for all the people, no matter what race, color, or creed? What if we didn't put up with anything less? What if?
go ahead. After that video, I thought it was very, very nice with that young girl talking about people, electing the government, working to have a government. And so, I know you would have some very good points. So go ahead. You were going to say a few things about what you think needs to happen for democracy to proliferate.
Now, thank you, Ben. In that video, of course, I was not aware that you were going to show in your program. This is the first time that I saw the video, but it reflects exactly one of the points that I was mentioned before about the challenge that the UN has in terms of how democracy is running today. Let's talk about history first, but then how society has transformed itself in a very short period of time. First of all, we need to understand that the United Nations was created in 1946 as a consequence of the end of Second World War II. Now, this environment or this political, economical, and social conditions were completely different as today. But more than that, during that period of time, we have the Cold War, you know, a conflict between the United States and the former Soviet Union, a country that imploded and does not exist anymore. So the international system has been challenged in terms of moving from a multilateral uh, system whereby there were two main superpowers, the United States and the former Soviet Union, with their respective allies. The United States, you have Europe and several other countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, in Asia and Africa. But at the same time, the former Soviet Union has been allied with the Warsaw Pact and West Eastern European countries and some other countries in Africa, in the Middle East, and so on and so forth. But this system that was based on the conflict between these two superpowers came to an end in the year 1991 when the former Soviet Union imploded and it was um, destroyed, to say the least, that country. Now, what happened since 1991 to the year, I will say, 2018, we have first that the United States become just one of the superpower, but um, it was a time whereby even the international community through the United Nations has a chance to build for the first time a socio-economic international agenda from the 1992 till I would say 2010. Why is that? Well, because the United Nations start promoting what is called International Conference on Sustainable Development, for example, in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. And then from that conference on, you have several other lists of conferences, such as, for example, the Fourth World Conference of Women in Beijing. You have the Copenhagen Conference in Denmark. You have the Cairo Conference in Egypt, where it was addressed the issue of population and development, and several other international conferences that set up not only political declaration but also a program of actions of these different conference, international conference that set up the international agenda on the economic, social field. This was important because you have a war that works in parallel. On the political field, you have the United States being the superpower ruling the war, but on the other economic, social issues, it was the United Nations through the international community that based their agenda on this outcome from the international conference. Now, that created system whereby countries were able to start including the outcome of this international conference into the national legislation. Let me give you an example. After the Beijing Conference of Women, it was decided by the General Assembly also that all member states should include in their national legislation the main outcome of that conference, which was the 12 critical areas of Beijing Platform of Action, and so on and so forth. So you have, for example, the Conference of Population and Development held in Egypt. In that conference, also, the member state decided to implement or to transform that international outcome to the um, national legislation. With that performance, what's happening is that, in a way, the international community was creating an agenda that was, I would say, common between countries, or at least there was agreement between member states of the United Nations to promote and implement that agenda. However, after time passed, in the year 2000, there was realization that many countries in the world were not able to not only, I would say, implement the commitment of those international conferences into reality within their own countries, but also there was a few resources available for supporting member states who wanted to do that. And that created also a crisis whereby the United Nations came up with the idea of promoting what it was called the Millennium Development Goals, which was a specific goals promoted by the UNDP, which is the United Nations Development Program, to be implemented in just 132 countries. And the idea would be that after that eight Millennium Development Goals, all those countries who were in developing world would be able to be in a position where the international agenda would be implemented in their own countries. Now, this was interesting in the sense of that creates a new path for elaborating and promoting a new economic and social agenda in developing countries. However, again, one of the main problems that this model suffered was the lack of international resources to be financing, because it was, I would say, part of a larger discussion that has previously taken place regarding the official assistance for development, which in simple terms means the money that developed countries allocates for developing countries to invest in this kind of agenda for implementing this kind of programs within their own countries.
You know what I find
Because of
interesting
that,
about what I find interesting about what you're expressing is, which is an important point to bring out, because sometimes when we view the media, we see conflict, we see war, but what we don't see is, unfortunately, is the positive side, which is what you're saying and what what you've been actually purveying and discussing and giving our viewers a chance to see, is that the coordination that actually exists in the world, how we're actually moving forward and actually to try and handle these situations. And it's very interesting because many times in the face of all the chaos of what's happened, especially in the last few years, it gets lost how much humanity and leaders like you and others like you, I'm sure that you have many friends, are doing for all of us. Let me ask you this, is in your own opinion, with your experience, what do you think are the most important, we're running to the end of the show, but in a conclusion, what do you think is important for us to move forward on? We only have about a minute or so left.
okay, I will say very quickly that the most important thing that we need to realize today is that we are living a revolution in terms of communications due to internet and social media. Because of this explosion of the capacity of every individual around the world to become, I would say, a reporter of reality, because they have what we can say about a simple, intelligent mobile, this small gadget can change the world, and is actually doing so. Sociologically speaking, the issue of free expression is never been in the past so accurate than as today, not because of the traditional journalism, but because every citizen has this gadget that can report live what happened in front of him or her about what any topic be happening in his or her country. And this revolution has changed the total conception of the free expression, because now you are facing a situation whereby the traditional media, television, uh, newspaper, the international broadcasting change, are just part of the game, but are not the only one who can transmit the reality. Is every individual in the world. We're talking about 7 billion people around the world that have this gadget that has overthrown the traditional role of media. And here is what democracy is about, because democracy is based on people, and people have the voice today that can be heard worldwide, even against what these traditional media have to say. So this is a challenge, because in the reality, what we need to promote is democracy in terms of giving the people the capacity and empowerment to work with their governments, because they elected their government. If for any reason their government are acting against them, that would be a dictatorship or whatever, then should be in the hands of that people to transform their reality. But that changed, in my view, the game, because the actors are not anymore 10, 20, or 15 international traditional media. We are talking about 7 billion people, and that's a huge difference in
Well,
terms of communication.
you know what? That's such a good point, and it is so. You illuminated it, and it's so vivid right now, and it's a beautiful point to end on. How humanity now is in communication, and where it was, like you said, a number of broadcasting groups, now it's humanity with these cell phones. And so the importance of democracy and the importance of all of us having a right to express ourselves and to vote. Ambassador Carlos, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, and congratulations for this wonderful initiative that you have, and I wish you the best for you and your audience as well.
Well, thank you so much. We will have you back again. And you and I have met a lot of very interesting people that we can also have back on the show. And for those of you watching the show tonight, let's heed what Ambassador Carlos Garcia has said. Let's use the communication we have, but let's put truthful communication on those lines. Let's be honest with each other. Let's realize that we're in a brotherhood of humanity, regardless of where we're from, and that together we can move forward. So we hope that you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again next time. Have a very good night.
Good night.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got. The world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet